This decision changed Lufthansa forever. In this video, we're looking at why Lufthansa still flies the Boeing 747 even when others have sent theirs to the scrapyard. The answer isn't simple, but it makes sense once you see the full picture. There are clues in the fuel prices, the cargo space, and the kind of flights Lufthansa runs from its busy hubs. There's also the age of the planes, what they cost, and how long they were meant to last. Some people think it's just about tradition or the upper deck, but what's really going on is a careful plan that's working well for now. We'll break down the reasons behind the move, how it fits into Lufthansa's big picture goals, and why this aircraft might be flying longer than anyone expected. If you've ever wondered why that 4-engine jet is still out there, this story will give you the full answer. To understand Lufthansa's bond with the 747, you have to go back to the early 1970s. By that time, the jumbo jet was already making waves. Pan Am had launched it in 1970, and the aircraft's size, range, and power were rewriting what airlines thought was possible. Lufthansa saw the opportunity early and moved quickly. In April 1972, it flew its first dedicated 747 freighter from Frankfurt to New York. That flight was the start of a long strategic relationship with the aircraft that would shape Lufthansa's future. As other airlines used the jumbo for passengers, Lufthansa leaned into both roles, cargo and long-haul travel. It was among the few carriers to operate nearly every major version of the 747. From the early 100 series to the Stretch 200, then the Advanced 400, and finally the modern Dash 8. Over the years, Lufthansa did more than fly the jumbo. It helped define how it was used. It became one of the jet's biggest champions in Europe and one of its most loyal operators worldwide. Lufthansa Cargo made a name for itself flying massive loads across the Atlantic in the freighter variant, while the passenger fleet became a backbone for routes to North America, Asia, and beyond. For Lufthansa, the 747 was a long-term investment, and that investment wasn't just emotional. It was grounded in decades of training, infrastructure, and strategy. Even now, Lufthansa continues to operate a large fleet of 747s. The airline still flies 8 of the older 747-400 models and 19 of the larger Dash 8 series. The 747-400s are nearly 25 years old and are finally approaching retirement. But the Dash 8, which began arriving in 2012, is still considered central to Lufthansa's long-haul plans. The cabins are being updated, and the aircraft are expected to keep flying into the 2030s. So when most airlines moved on to twin-engine jets, Lufthansa held on. And if you want to know why, the answer starts here, with a long, steady relationship that's still shaping the skies today. Enjoying the breakdown so far? Then hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives like this, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that rewrites aviation history. Up next, we're getting into the hard numbers, fuel math, cabin economics, fleet costs, and the hidden strengths that helped Lufthansa outfly the trend. For most airlines, the jumbo era ended with a quiet fade-out. Fuel prices rose, regulations tightened, and leaner jets like the Boeing 787 and the Airbus A350 took center stage. Quads became a liability. Airlines from the US to Asia grounded their 747s, retired the A380, and moved on. But Lufthansa didn't follow the script. When others downsized, Lufthansa doubled down. While Delta and United sent their jumbos to the desert, Lufthansa was still receiving brand new Dash 8s. The decision looked strange until you saw the details. Frankfurt and Munich are slot restricted. The 747-8 gave Lufthansa a high-capacity solution without needing more flights. And with cargo demand surging, the aircraft's massive lower deck turned into a quiet moneymaker. Other airlines were betting on new fuel savings. Lufthansa was banking on what it already knew: solid performance, trained crews, existing simulators, and hangars built for the jumbo. While competitors waited for delayed deliveries, Lufthansa kept flying. But this wasn't nostalgia. It was calculated. Lufthansa took a so-called outdated jet and made it essential again, and it paid off. When the aviation world talks about efficiency, one number keeps coming up: fuel burn per seat. On that metric, the Boeing 747 has fallen far behind. The 747-8, Lufthansa's most recent variant, consumes approximately 10 to 15% more fuel per seat than modern twin jets, like the Boeing 787 or the Airbus A350. And when measured against newer models such as the 78-10 or the A350-1000, the gap widens even further. These aren't theoretical numbers, they represent millions of euros in additional operating costs each year. So why keep flying it? For most airlines, the answer was clear. They didn't. British Airways, Korean Air, Delta, and even longtime jumbo champions like Qantas retired their 747s between 2020 and 2023. The pressures were mounting, skyrocketing fuel prices, post-pandemic cost-cutting, and tighter emissions rules made four-engine jets nearly impossible to justify. But Lufthansa took a different route. Even as global jet fuel prices climbed above $3.50 per gallon in mid-2022, Lufthansa kept its 747-8 fleet on core intercontinental routes. Frankfurt to Chicago, Munich to Tokyo. These long hauls are where the jumbo performs reliably, but still at a financial disadvantage. A single round trip on a 747-8 burns over 190,000 liters of fuel, several thousand liters more than an equivalent flight on a 787-9 or an Airbus A350. Then there's the issue of maintenance. The 747 has 4 engines instead of 2. That's double the inspections, double the risk of failure, and double the cost. Lufthansa's twin-jet A350s are cheaper to maintain precisely because they're newer, lighter, and built with simpler systems. The 747-8 still runs on heavier landing gear, older cockpit electronics, and more demanding support architecture. Over time, these factors inflate maintenance budgets by millions. Still, the jumbo flies. This is where you need to hold your breath. In 2023, Lufthansa operated more passenger 747s than any airline on Earth. Not because it was cost-effective, but because they weren't ready to walk away. Industry analysts scratched their heads. Sustainability groups criticized the carbon footprint. Even regulators issued warnings about operating older quads under new climate rules. But Lufthansa didn't flinch. And this is where it gets even more interesting. In 2024, Germany introduced stricter carbon offset requirements. Lufthansa paid the price, absorbing more green penalties than competitors operating modern twin jets. Most expected a quick phase-out. Lufthansa stayed the course. And that decision continues to raise questions across the industry. From a distance, Lufthansa's decision to stick with the Boeing 747 looked flawed. The costs were high, the engines were 4 instead of 2, and the age of the aircraft made it look like a dinosaur among modern jets. But maybe, just maybe, the very thing that seemed like a liability, its sheer size, turned out to be its smartest feature. Lufthansa's 2 largest hubs, Frankfurt and Munich, operate under some of the tightest airport slot regulations in Europe. These airports are classified as Level 3 slot-coordinated facilities, which means that every takeoff and landing must be pre-approved and tightly scheduled. There is no flexibility to simply add more flights. If Lufthansa wanted to grow, it couldn't do so by adding frequency. It had to add capacity per slot. This is where the 747-8 started to shine. The jumbo jet can carry more than 400 passengers and a significant volume of cargo, all in a single departure. Compared to a twin-engine Airbus A350 or a Boeing 787, which typically seats around 300 to 320 passengers in Lufthansa's configuration, the jumbo offers a capacity boost of up to 30% without using a single additional slot. And this is where it gets clever. During peak demand periods, especially on long-haul routes to North America and Asia, Lufthansa used the 747-8 to maximize slot efficiency. One takeoff meant more revenue. One landing meant more cargo space and more passengers handled, without the need for extra gate time, flight crews, or operational complexity across an already saturated airfield. Even more striking, during the pandemic lull in 2020, Lufthansa flew what were later called ghost flights, nearly empty aircraft launched just to retain their hard-earned slots. Critics pounced on the environmental waste, but Lufthansa understood the value. In their view, losing a slot at Frankfurt or Munich could mean losing a route permanently, or worse, letting a competitor claim it. This is where you might want to lean in. In 2021, as part of a financial bailout deal, Lufthansa was required to give up some of its slots to new market entrants. But the company negotiated hard to ensure the handover was minimal and temporary. Even as government pressure mounted, Lufthansa played a long game, betting that maintaining access to its hubs was more valuable than quick restructuring. And it worked. The jumbo jet's capacity helped Lufthansa retain its dominance without needing more frequency. The aircraft was no longer just a legacy. It had become an asset shaped by geography, airport policy, and market positioning. Lufthansa's investment in the Boeing 747 extends far beyond the aircraft itself. Over time, the airline structured core parts of its operations around the jumbo. That structure cannot be easily dismantled. Pilot training at Lufthansa remains deeply tied to the 747. Full-motion simulators built for the jumbo are still in use today. These simulators replicate the aircraft's complex systems, control logic, and emergency procedures. Thousands of flight hours are logged on them each year by both new and recurrent crew. Replacing these machines means losing years of technical groundwork, recertifying training programs, and purchasing entirely new simulation platforms, a process that takes time and costs tens of millions of euros. Hangars are another anchor point. Lufthansa Technik operates heavy maintenance facilities in Frankfurt, Munich, Hamburg, and Malta that were configured specifically for the 747. These include engine hoists, scaffolding for upper deck access, and structural jigs for the jumbo's distinct fuselage sections. Aircraft like the Airbus A350 or Boeing 787 demand different layouts. Lufthansa would need to rebuild or redesign large portions of its facilities just to accommodate them. You're at the edge of your seat, but stay still. It's about to get even better. Operational systems present their own challenges. Lufthansa's gate assignments, turnaround procedures, and in-flight service logistics are still optimized for the jumbo's dual-deck boarding, four-cabin layout, and high-density seating. Crew scheduling software tracks 747 specific duty patterns, including long-haul rest rotations and sector pairing. Replacing the aircraft changes those patterns completely, requiring new algorithms, retraining, and months of system recalibration. Each adjustment introduces new points of failure. The parts inventory is another burden. Lufthansa stores a deep stockpile of jumbo-specific components, nose gear assemblies, tail cone pressure bulkheads, cabin pressurization valves, and control surface actuators. These spares are distributed across its European maintenance bases. Moving to a modern twin-jet fleet would mean scrapping much of this inventory. The losses stretch into millions of euros in unused or obsolete parts. And this is where it starts to sting. Fleet switches are known to strain airline operations. Crew members unfamiliar with new equipment make more errors. Scheduling mismatches cause missed rest windows and flight delays. Maintenance personnel trained for years on jumbo architecture require time and certification to adapt. When airlines have retired wide bodies in the past, operational recovery often took 3 to 4 years. Lufthansa would face the same risk. There are also knock-on effects. Lufthansa's suppliers, engine overhaul partners, airframe repair contractors, systems calibration teams have long supported the 747's specific demands. A switch forces renegotiation or termination of dozens of existing service agreements. By 2023, Lufthansa Technik managed more 747 heavy maintenance slots than any other European provider. That network of people, tools, schedules, and logistics cannot be uprooted without major disruption. Keeping the jumbo flying may look outdated, but breaking away from a system built around it could create more damage than delay. For Lufthansa, the cost of staying wasn't small. The cost of leaving could be bigger. When Boeing officially ended 747 production in 2023, it was the final phase in a wave of retirements. Airlines on 3 continents, United, British Airways, Qantas, Korean Air, and even major cargo operators, systematically removed their 747s from service. Lufthansa didn't plan to become the last steward, but today, it stands alone. The airline continues flying 8 Boeing 747-400s and 19 747-8s in passenger configuration, more than any other carrier worldwide. That reality makes Lufthansa the only major operator still preserving the aircraft's passenger presence. This is where it becomes critical. No other airline now maintains type-specific pilot training, certification, or operational protocols for the 747. Aviation regulators across Europe lean on Lufthansa's safety data, maintenance records, and procedure manuals. When Lufthansa finally retires the jet, there will be no benchmark left globally to assess its continued airworthiness. By 2025, Lufthansa stands as the only airline still flying the 747 in regularly scheduled passenger service. That means every cabin layout, route map, boarding routine, and public statement now rests solely on one airline's shoulders. Once Lufthansa sunsets the aircraft, the Queen of the Skies effectively exits the passenger domain forever. Now hold your breath. Lufthansa Technik remains Europe's top heavy maintenance provider for the 747. The company continues to operate full overhaul bays, structural repair programs, and certification systems specifically tailored to the jumbo, maintained solely because Lufthansa retains its fleet. No other operator offers equivalent capability for passenger 747 work. Suppliers still produce limited-run 747 components because of ongoing demand tied to Lufthansa. Rolls-Royce continues engine support for the Dash 8 fleet. Tail cone manufacturers, gear specialists, and interior panel providers still service the aircraft, all because Lufthansa keeps the flights ongoing. Here's the pivot. Running the 747 has shifted from symbolic heritage into institutional duty. If Lufthansa retires the jet, it doesn't just ground aircraft, it deactivates the only live ecosystem sustaining them. Pilot competence fades, manuals go unused, supply chains shrink, simulators become obsolete. The global operational network collapses. Meanwhile, the Dash 8 remains critical on slot-restricted long-haul routes that demand high capacity. That means the political, financial, and logistical infrastructure built around the jumbo remains active simply because Lufthansa keeps flying it. This is no emotional tie, it's an operational necessity. If Lufthansa steps away, the 747 becomes pure nostalgia. Farewell flights and photo ops mean nothing. There will be no other airline to reinforce its operational heritage. Lufthansa now holds a unique position. As long as it keeps the 747 in regular service, the Queen remains in command. Every final scheduled flight announcement, every cabin upgrade briefing, every system update now shapes whether the jumbo lives or becomes legend. This isn't a journey toward retirement. It's the final chapter in which Lufthansa chooses whether the Queen of the Skies remains alive or fades into history. Lufthansa never set out to become the final operator of the Boeing 747. That position emerged by elimination. One airline after another stepped away, and Lufthansa kept flying. Each scheduled departure now carries more than passengers. It carries the continuity of a global standard that once defined long-haul travel. The infrastructure, certification, and technical expertise that keep the aircraft running are increasingly concentrated in one place. And the moment Lufthansa exits, that support vanishes with it. No other airline has the operational depth to sustain it. The jet's future doesn't depend on sentiment. It depends on whether Lufthansa continues to find value in flying it. The 747 is no longer a fleet. It is a final holdout. And Lufthansa, knowingly or not, has become its last defender. We cover these moments because they shape more than flight schedules. They show how strategy, politics, and pressure converge at 30,000 feet. If that's your kind of story, this channel's where you'll want to be. Subscribe for more aircraft decisions that change course, collapsed programs, or kept giants alive. If there's a fleet you think we've overlooked, a risk that paid off or failed hard, drop it in the comments. We watch closely, and we always come back with the full story.